So my name is Orla Carolan. So my background is in accounting. I'm not an auditor, so I'll just put that up front. So background in accounting, I started my career, I actually started off here in Trinity College, probably in this lecture theatre. Spent 4 years of my life here doing BESS quite a long time ago. So it's really nice to be back today. Probably spent more time across the road in the Buttery Bar than here in the lecture theatre. But it's lovely to be back here today. Post that, I worked in the funds industry for quite a long time, worked for JP Morgan, mainly in financial reporting, so and that's where I did my accountancy exams. I then retrained as an executive and career coach. Green to go forward, sorry, here we go. So there's my introduction, which I'm halfway through, so here I am. here. So then decided I didn't want to do the accounting anymore and retrained as an executive and career coach. And really, that's kind of where I started to think about impact in terms of my career and helping others, and really kind of moving away from, I guess, the money-making machine of where I was, and then really that brought me to professional services and worked for Grant Thornton for a number of years. First of all in people and change, and then back in financial services again. And there I was really, really lucky to do a secondment with the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, which has brought me really to where I am today with Future Planet. And that secondment I took up in 2022. And it was at a time when EFRAG were starting off on their journey of developing out the sector-specific standards and the ESRSs, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a minute. But that's really how I got into sustainability reporting and CSRD, and the last two there. So I also qualified as a certified investment fund director a couple of years ago, and I do some lecturing, and I feel like both of those may be my future career. So it's very checkered, but yeah, so now with Future Planet and really kind of very deep in CSRD, sustainability reporting, and thinking about how to help organisations make an impact. So EFRAG, ESRS and the future. So who are EFRAG, or EFRAG as our fellow Europeans call it? So the role of EFRAG really is to provide technical advice to the European Commission around the inclusions within the European sustainability reporting standards. So they're a standard setter essentially. They're not a conduct authority, and lots of people ask questions when I'm kind of talking about this as to, well, what will they do if people don't comply? Well, that's not actually their job. They are the standard setter in the same way that the ISSB are, or other standard setters. So that's a really important point. And what's in the European Sustainability Reporting Standards is actually outlined in the CSRD. So it was their job to transpose those into a set of standards that could be used by organisations to do their sustainability reporting. And if you read the CSRD is a very deep read. I'm sure, well, maybe nobody has read it, but I've read it a few times, not all of it, but certain parts multiple times. It does actually outline what's to be included in those standards. So they have points there around kind of climate, human rights, governance, etc. So it's in there, and it was EFRAG's job to put those into the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. And I mean, they had a lot of ambition around that. They had a very tight timeline. It was a very difficult process to get the first set of standards out, which is what the likes of Kerry and other organisations are now trying to implement. But their work plan is on their website. Everything they do is public. There's loads of information on their website. If anybody has time to do some bedtime reading, it's all in there. But I've just kind of pulled out a couple of the ones that I think are really important in terms of where we're going. So we all know about the Set 1 standards. They're the ones that are being implemented or being used by organisations at the moment for reporting. But what comes next? So the sector-specific standards are really a focus at the moment for EFRAG. They have in and around 41 sectors identified. It's a moving target. I'm going to talk about the standard setting process on sector-specific in a couple of minutes, so we'll focus on that. But you can see here some of the sectors that are being focused on firstly, and they're the ones we should see coming out to public consultation next year. And they're all the usual suspects in terms of high climate impact. So oil and gas, upstream, downstream, mining, quarrying and coal, transport, textiles, etc., etc. The financial institutions one has come in and gone out and come in and gone out. It's back in again now. There's a lot of influence in that sector, and obviously through the investment side of financial institutions and the credit side, you know, that can really influence in terms of that climate impact. So that's kind of how they decided this. There's also a lot of voices in the room that have preferences. So there's a lot of debate that goes on about what goes in and what comes out. So these are some of the standards that you will see. The first two in orange there are very well developed. They were well developed when I was there back in 2022. So they're the ones that you will see kind of coming out for consultation first. The next kind of focus area for EFRAG is SME standards. So there's two SME standards. They have been issued an exposure draft. A public consultation has been done. They have got a lot of feedback and now they're making lots of changes, which is the process at EFRAG. But they're really, really important because of the size of the SME sector and how important it is to the economy. So the listed SME standard is not really going to apply very much to Irish entities. We have a very small number of listed SMEs, and by virtue of the fact that they have securities listed on an exchange, they fall within the category of the larger entities anyway under the Irish regulation. So it's kind of a non-starter, to be honest, the listed SME standard. But it's still worth a read. But the other one, the voluntary SME standard, is a really good standard, and it's not set out within the CSRD. There's no mandate in there for any entities to apply that standard, but it does put a cap on what larger entities can ask SMEs for in terms of information. So it has disclosures in there across ES and G. It has cross-cutting in terms of how they prepare their sustainability statements, but it is voluntary and it gets SMEs on the road to collect data for various different reasons. And we're expecting a final exposure draft there in December 2024. The next one then, so the XBRL taxonomy. So the CSRD says that digitally tagged report is required when entities report under the CSRD. So that draft XBRL taxonomy has been done by EFRAG and has been delivered to ESMA. So it's in the legislative process, and we should see that 2026/2027 coming out for entities to be able to file their reports, and they will go to the European Single Access Point where all of the reports will be filed. So there is lots of other stuff in the EFRAG work plan around interoperability. They work continuously with the other bodies and standard setters, GRI, the EBA, for example, the ISSB. So they really try and align on the standards, and I think we will continue to see more alignment as the years go on and as more standards are issued. So just some highlights from the work plan. So in terms of the sector-specific standard setting process, so everybody is worried about sector-specific standards. What are they going to bring? How much more work is it going to be? I actually think it's going to improve the situation, to be honest, because it's looking at every sector individually, and essentially the standard setting process is a double materiality assessment at sector level that's conducted by EFRAG. And just to take a step back, they do have a separate standard or an exposure draft called SEC 1, which outlines how they assess sectors and how they actually split those sectors out into the 41, or it might go to 39, or it might go to 45. There's a lot of debate around that. Those sectors are based on what we call NACE codes. So it's the, the sector classification system that's used in Europe, and it breaks down all of the sectors by codes and sub-activities. So that's how they do it. They map it into what sectors has SASB developed in the US, so the ones that are now under the ISSB. So they're trying to align to those sectors. And you will also see, for example, GRI are issuing sector standards across similar sectors in line with EFRAG. So they've issued oil and gas already. They've issued agriculture already. So that's how they classify sectors. And that is an exposure draft in itself that's going through the process. So then they develop out exposure drafts for the sectors. And that, again, is a sector-specific DMA. They develop out what are the specific topics for the sector. They align that into the sector-agnostic standard. So what have we already identified from a non-sector-specific or agnostic perspective, and what else? What else do we need to put in there from a sector-specific so that in those particular sectors, organisations know what are the topics that they need to report on. It then goes through, similar to what happens with organisations, the stakeholder engagement process, and EFRAG have lots of industry and sector level communities, they call them, that they bring organisations, NGOs, standard setters, people out in civil society into stakeholder engagement process to get feedback on what they're doing. And to be honest, there's very low representation from Ireland on those groups. When I was there, I was the only person from Ireland working within the Secretariat, even though there's lots of opportunities for people to be there. So if any of the organisations, in particular sectors, like for Kerry, for example, you can join those community groups or have somebody from the organisation to do that and feed into the sectors, into the standard setting process. So I would definitely encourage that. It's a really good discussion, and you get all of the different perspectives. It then goes through their technical expert groups, and they're the advisor. They advise the Sustainability Reporting Board at EFRAG, who are the decision maker, and they finalise an exposure draft, which then goes out to public consultation. So it can go to public consultation for between 90 and 120 days, depends what they decide, and then it goes through another process of redeliberation, redrafting, and then that's done. So it's a really, really long process. But it's actually a short process for standards. I think GRI take about 4 years to issue a standard, but EFRAG have a lot less time than that. So that's sector specific. I'm just going to focus a little bit just on the VSME standard, because I think it's really important given the size of the amount of SMEs in our own economy here and the value chain impact, where SMEs are sitting in the value chain of large organisations reporting. So they started off with 3 modules here on the left. They had a very basic module for first-time reporters, never did any sustainability reporting before. Let's get people on their journey. Two cross-cutting metrics around kind of strategy and how they prepare their report, and 10 metrics across ES and G. They then had a second module around policies, action plans, and targets. So if you were an organisation that already had these in place, you could use that module. And then the business partnering module, which is a really important one when it comes to value chain, is for those entities who are getting requests from their bank for data because they're looking to access finance, or from other organisations in the value chain, upstream or downstream, looking for data. So that's kind of the business partner module is still there, the basic module is still there, but they've taken out the second piece, which means that no longer materiality assessment required for any VSMEs in doing this. They just apply metrics if they're applicable to them. So they're moving from a basic into a comprehensive module, which is around the requests from the value chain. And then they're trying to develop out what they call the financial institutions align model, which is they're looking to align to some of the EU taxonomy sectors so that they have that kind of sustainable definitions around kind of sectors in doing kind of sustainable strategies, etc. So that's where the VSME is, and we'll expect that to be finished by the end of the year, to be issued next year. The standard is really worth a read, and there's lots of good guidance in there for SMEs. I'm not going to labour on this one. This is the one that the large organisations are grappling with at the moment. So these are all of the data points under the Set 1 standards. And we've already heard kind of reference to governance, the importance of governance. So I'm just going to focus a little bit just on the mandatory disclosures. And this is only a very small number of them. So 10 of the Set 1 standards are subject to double materiality. So you do your double materiality assessment, you decide what's material for your organisation through a very stringent and detailed process, but you also have mandatory disclosures that sometimes get a little bit forgotten because everybody's obsessed with double materiality. And within those general disclosures under ESRS 2, you need to talk about your governance structures, how you have done your double materiality assessment process, who's responsible for it, what skills do they have. So it's really important not to just focus on double materiality, because these mandatory disclosures have to be done. And you'll see here on the right, so IRO management, there's loads of acronyms in ESRS, is around your impacts, risks and opportunities. So it's really that whole detailed process around identifying, assessing the oversight of how you've gotten to that final impacts, risks and opportunities that go into your sustainability statements. and your decision-making process and internal control procedures around that. And like that's already been touched on today. So really important to think about that. The role of technology. So I think that this has been, well, there's loads of new technologies emerging in this market, which is absolutely brilliant. And I think in a couple of years, we'll all be pressing the button, and that will be great. We'll still have to do the governance piece, but we'll get there. But there's definitely been a reluctance to kind of move with technology in this space because, and that's only my experience from a consultancy perspective, because there's just so much to take in on the standards, and what am I doing? And I can't deal with technology at the same time, just let me use my spreadsheet. But actually it turns into 500 spreadsheets. And that's really the challenge at the moment in year one. I think for year two reporting, we're going to see lots of organizations move onto new technologies. So where can this help? And again, this has been mentioned already, but double materiality, every organisation is doing their double materiality assessment. We're going to see lots of published ones. I can see us having a sector-level DMA that's generic, within a platform, and then you just tweak to your own business in year two, and you can revalidate. So, AI can identify material topics from all of the reports that are out there, and it can identify your IROs at sector level, and then you have to take it down to your business level. Stakeholder modelling and mapping is another one you could do. And then really, the data is just really, really important. So the collection of that data into one repository, the validation of the data, allowing your auditor to come in and be able to look at that data within your platform, that's really important. And then as we move and we get the final XBRL, so the tagging will be done within the technology as well. So I think that this will grow and move quite quickly, as it already is, in the next 12 months or so. Okay, so lessons from a preparer, and I just want to caveat this by saying, from a consultancy perspective, I've been more in the middle space of the large entities. So, we have our very large and listed entities who are reporting 2024 for 2025. They're generally a lot more sophisticated, but some of our entities, so the next tranche of entities, who are not your listed entities, reporting 2025 and 2026. Some of them have done nothing before, some of them are sophisticated, and then you've got some in the middle. So that's kind of where my experience is coming from. I mentioned already as well, top-down, bottom-up engagement is essential. You need to get your board and your governance and your executive on, in the room from the very start. They need to understand what's required. So that's really, really important, and training can help with that. Utilise organisational skill sets. So there isn't like millions of people out in the market who know how to do this. So, it's a great opportunity in an organisation to upskill. You leverage everywhere. So, risk, procurement, your finance function, HR, everybody has a role to play here, and there's a huge opportunity for people to upskill around this process and to build internal teams. Collaborate with industry peers, so everybody has the same problem at the moment and the same challenge. There's some good examples of this out there. So Board BIA, for example, commissioned sector-level double materiality assessments for the dairy and the beef sector, which then they gave to all of their members of Origin Green, and then they just have to take that, assess it, and then go to their own organisational level to actually develop that out. So that's a really good example, and it'd be great to see that across some of the other sectors. Embrace technology. It's coming. I think it's going to make everybody's life a lot easier. I think in year two, people will have more headspace for it. Eat the elephant one bite at a time. This is really hard. Like, it's really, really hard for people. One day at a time, one part at a time, take it off and move to the next piece. The guidance is really good that's out there. You can set a really clear process for yourself. Nothing will be perfect, and no one knows it all. Perfect is the enemy of good, I think, with this at the moment. First year, there's going to be lots of gaps. We know that. So, do as good as you can do. It's a marathon, not a sprint. For the week that's in it, anyone doing the Dublin Marathon this weekend? No? Am I the only one? Yeah. I'm only slightly scared about it, but yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So this is a long-term game. We're trying. The spirit of the CSRD is to drive impact, positive impact. We're all caught up in compliance, and we have to be to get the job done at the start. But that's really what it's about. It's a long-term game. So yeah, it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. And on that note, I will. Oh no, I have one more thing to do. Sorry. So I'm a really bad salesperson, by the way. But so as part of my job at Future Planet, we have collaborated on a book with lots of different sustainability experts around the globe. And it's available on Amazon now. It's officially launching, I think, today. There's a LinkedIn Live. But all the proceeds go to our Children's Trust. It's modelled on ESRS. So each chapter is based on one of the ESRSs, but it's about people's personal stories and their experience for each of those topics. So yeah, I think it's around €10 on Amazon. So all proceeds to the Children's Trust. If anybody would like to buy it, that would be great. I wrote S4, Consumers and End Users. That's it. Thank you.
So we have some brief time for questions. So again, if there's any questions in the room, just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone round to you. So the two things you talked about, Orla, talked about many things, but the voluntary SME standards but also the sector-specific ones. So, I mean, if you're trying to start this as an SME, is there anything, for example, in the sector-specific standards that might be useful for them to use as they're trying to sort of climb that mountain you talked about?
Absolutely, because the sector-specific standards will tell you what's important for your sector from a sustainability perspective. So it will call out the topics and sustainability matters across E, S and G that are important to that sector. So I think that's really going to help SMEs. The only challenge is there's a bit of a time lag now on some of the sectors. But again, those high impact sectors will come first. So I think that's really going to help SMEs because they'll be able to refer to sector specific standards and then decide which disclosures within the SME they include.
Yeah. The questions come in on Slido, but it actually ties into another question I was going to ask. So the question that has come in on Slido is around some of the information on technology that's out there. I was going to ask about as you move from year 1 to year 2, because I suppose if you look at how companies are grappling with year 1, what might change and what might be there to help them, or how will things develop as you get into year 2? Will technology be part of that?
Definitely, I think, and I'll just speak from my own personal experience of this because there's loads of different platforms, they all do different things. Some are massive providers like Microsoft or Workiva, some are small providers like FuturePlan. There's lots of smaller providers coming out in this space. I think there's been a reluctance to do the double materiality on a platform in the first year because it's just it's complicated and there's a lot to deal with. Like for people, in year 2, what would be, make things much easier is to integrate your year 1 double materiality onto a platform in year 2, and then all you have to do is revalidate, and you've kind of gotten over the first stage. For data and reporting, the sooner you can do that, the better, because otherwise you're going to be collecting all of your metric. I mean, there's over 1,000 data points for set 1. I mean, organizations don't need to report on 1,000 data points. It's what's material for them. But that data collection piece is going to be like Excel, nightmare for people. And then really, if you have that kind of in a central location and it's automated, you can also then use technology to draft your disclosures. Okay. So I think that's where it's going. So for now, the data side, really important to get the collection. I'd say you can do DMA year 1 on a platform, but I think more companies will move to do that in year 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just checking, any questions from the room here at all? You can raise your hand. Not yet. I've one more question, which is more around, it's come up actually, people have asked me and I don't know the answer, so I'm going to ask you. Yeah. It's around the value chain.
Yeah.
And this question where you have to sort of go up and down your value chain and look at the impacts and the risks. Yeah. And the question I'm always asked is how far? How far do you need to go up and how far do you need to go down?
Yeah, it doesn't define, it's not defined within the guidance. And again, EFAG are the standard setter, so they're not going to prescribe to you stop here. It's a life cycle approach, really. You need to map your value chain front to back. But when it comes to the value chain, you're looking at material impacts, risks and opportunities. So those real hotspots, there is a transitionary time of 3 years on doing all of your disclosures against your value chain requirements. It gives you time. You need to include it in your materiality assessment, identify those hotspots, but there is time to actually do the disclosure and collect the data from your suppliers and your customers. Okay. And again, you can use sector averages, you can use proxies if you don't have the data.
Okay.
So there is a little bit of an out there.
Okay, very good. Sorry, yeah, we have one question
Sure.
over here. Just get the mic. And I think that's probably only have time for one question and then we might move on. So, thank you.
Thanks, Orla. That was brilliant. Just in terms of, I think the SMEs are really, really important, but also the multinationals.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of third country standards at this point, or were there any discussions based on your secondment and EFRAG?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think TCFD has been adopted by a couple of countries. You would be able to answer this question better than me. The ISSB, well, the UK are adopting their own sustainability reporting standards, which I think are coming from the TCFD and the ISSB standards, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So there seems to be a theme there around ESRS for Europe, ISSB/TCFD. I mean, a lot of entities had used GRI previously, which is a voluntary standard. I don't really know where that's going to go now that we're coming into kind of mandatory reporting, but
yeah, I think GRI is now sort of being integrated into ISS. We're getting back in hell at this point.
Yeah.
But GRI, I think, is coming in, or ISSB. I know Australia, Singapore, there's a whole load of countries that are doing ISSB.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the SEC in the US, and then you can pick your state to add on top of that, and then you can pick your lawsuit to try and figure out when things are actually going to happen.
I do think Europe has paved the way, though.
Yeah.
Like, we're well ahead. Even when you look at the ISSB standards, like, they've only issued as the 2 standards. So we're on 12, and we're going to have sector-specific. But the ISSB has subsumed SASB, so they have sector-specific standards. They are financial materiality. They're not impact materiality. They're not double materialities. There is a difference there. But I think that's where you'll see maybe a bit of momentum where they'll start to bring those standards in under the ISSB.